Dummy plan take 1. Hey guys, my name is Mark, and in this video we're going to take a look at this Meyer Optik Gorliz dummy plan 50mm f 2.8 lens. This lens uses a 3-element optical design that's close to 130 years old. Now I should also mention that it has no multi-coating, it isn't very fast, and has a terrible minimum focusing distance compared to most 50mm lenses. It can be found these days for around $20, so that's a plus, right? For some reason, my grandfather kept this lens in his bag even though he had other, presumably better 50mm options on hand, and it's time to find out why. This is the German Meyer Optik Gorliz Dummy-Plan 50mm f 2.8 SLR lens. First produced in 1962, but I suspect this is a slightly later version since it's the automatic shutter variant. It came in both the M42 mount system, as seen here, as well as one for the older Exacta mount. Now it uses the Cooke triplet 3-element lens design, which is comprised of a negative flint glass element in the center, with crown glass elements on each side. First established in 1893, the lens design at the time was a major advancement in optical design, and of course, completely obsolete by today's standards. Or is it? Regardless, for me, this is where the fun begins. Where have I heard that before? This is where the fun,
This is where the fun begins.
The lens has an f2.8 to f22 aperture scale and uses 6 blades in its aperture design. One interesting thing to note is that the aperture ring is actually on the outer part of the lens, similar to the Carl Zeiss Jena 58mm f2 and the Helios 44-2. Now the biggest thing you'll notice right away with this lens is its size and weight. It's the same size as my M42 to E-mount adapter and weighs about the same as well. Now I know this lens wasn't made for the digital era, so looking at it through digital eyes versus emulsion is a little daft, but that said, let's see how this $20 lens, which was entry level at the time and is using an outdated optical design with no multi-coating, performs. Not to curb your expectations at all or anything. Okay, I'm totally being cheeky. I'm just gonna say it. In the very short time I've been using this lens, I'm completely blown away by this thing. Here I am pretending not to be excited about this lens, but I am. Now at f2.8, it's not a very fast lens for a typical 50mm, which usually give you at least an f1.8, if not an f1.4. Don't let that fool you. I made the mistake years ago as being a deterrent for even picking up and using this lens, as I chose the Pentacon specifically for the speed over this thing. I mean, I still love the Pentacon, but I missed out on the last few years as to what this lens had to offer. Now wide open, you can get some pretty good results as long as you nail your focus. The focus throw is fairly long, so there is room to dial this in, but even still, using all the manual focus cheats a mirrorless camera offers, don't expect razor sharp or even Takumar sharp wide open. There's some definite haliation or slight glow on your focus point. Now, this could be very useful in some cases, it just depends on how you lean on it. While sharpest at the center, there's a slight swirl or softness at the edges. Now this can work well for portraits or for artistic focus, but keep that in mind when shooting with this lens. It's not as pronounced as the swirl you get with the Helios, but in the right shooting configurations, you can definitely get some swirly results with this lens. Now stopping down, of course, will get you an overall sharper image. And most lenses perform best at least 2 stops down, so for this one, expect the best results between f5.6 and f11. Now just keep in mind you'll get some hexagonal patterns in your bokeh in some cases. Like this. Now remember, this is a $20 lens. Now compared to other 50mm at this time, this lens doesn't have a great minimum focusing distance at 2.5 feet or 0.75 meters. Now the Takumar by comparison can get closer at 1.5 feet or 0.45 meters, and the Pentagon 50 can get even closer at just over 1 foot or 0.3 meters.
One thing you notice really quick is how tight the focus is when it's cold outside. This thing is super stiff now.
Now I mentioned earlier this lens doesn't have any coatings on it, but it doesn't do a terrible job at controlling chromatic aberrations. Shooting in high contrast conditions, I wasn't able to spot a lot. They're there, but you have to really look for them. It might be due to the simplistic 3-element optical design, or maybe it would be more of an issue if the lens had a faster aperture, but at 2.8, it's not bad. Now flaring is also pretty interesting as well, considering there are no lens coatings to help dampen it. A strong light source when shooting wide open will blow out your contrast levels and, depending on the angle of the light source, either destroy or enhance your compositions. There's always a balance with this stuff. It can either work for you or against you, depending on how you use it. That goes with everything, really, how you use it. Now, one interesting thing I did notice with this lens that I've never personally experienced it before is the soap bubble bokeh. It's quite prominent and easy to achieve when shooting wide open. It's not original trial plan soap bubble bokeh, which Meyer Optik has recently brought back from the dead in their new lens line, but it's something, and I like it. I do love the way this lens renders the background as well. It seems to lack 3D dimension, but I still think it's cool, especially when there are a lot of foreground and background elements surrounding the subject. Definitely something I need to experiment more with. Experimentation, that's ultimately what inspired me to get into shooting with vintage lenses, a cheap way to experiment. And my grandfather's Pentagon 50 f1.8 was the catalyst for that. Since then, everything has changed. I've dedicated a channel to talking about this stuff. I'm shooting more now than I ever did before, and I'm finding ways to incorporate these lenses into my professional film and television work. It's really amazing. Even after all these years since starting this journey, I still find myself wanting to explore the core of what got me started. This is a really fun lens to play with. Considering it can be found for pretty cheap, I think is just a bonus. A half-century old lens with an outdated formula, but I think despite that, it has a lot of potential to reward a curious soul who dares challenge its relevance in this modern digital era. Great color, interesting flares, bubble bokeh, and affordable. This lens has definitely been the sleeper hit I wish I had discovered sooner. I totally see why my grandfather kept this thing around, and I'm really glad I finally decided to use it. Now, vintage is a choice beyond anything else, and in all my time down this rabbit hole, choice is the ultimate form of artistic freedom. Besides, who knows where it will lead you? Thanks as always for watching, guys, and see you next time. When I shoot with this lens, it's awesome. Oh yeah, I forgot I'm totally on a fully manual lens now. This is the very first video I'm shooting 100% on my SLR lenses. No autofocus. Better not move around too much, because I'll be out of focus based on my settings. Where am I? I'll go over here. Right here. I'm walking over here. All right, that's enough stuff for the end. I'm gonna go shoot some photos now. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.